Greetings and hello, Kaiser Philip V here today to talk to you about my first experience at an SSPX chapel. I know in the past, and many people have raised this concern, that I used to be very anti-SSPX. Well, what changed? Well, if you go back through my YouTube history where I put a lot of personal venting because I feel like a lot of things that are missing between people and their internet followings is this emotional connection, this idea that we're friends, that we know each other, we could talk to each other, that if we met each other on the street, we could just, regardless of how many followers I get, we could just be friends. That's how I feel about that. And so I put a lot of personal stuff out there sometimes when people ask why I would do that because it seems embarrassing. Well, it's because I want people to know that I'm a person too, especially this early on in the movement. I want people to see and understand that I too struggle with this stuff. I too realize how hard it is, and I really just want people to, understand that, so that at no point, do they feel as if, I'm some unreachable entity or that I just don't get it in some aspects, when really I honestly do. I mean, if we're talking about, the problems in the church today. Now, as to why I changed my position in SSPX, you can go back through as I've been trying to lead up to, you can go back to my YouTube videos and things, and you can see my struggles with the church. You can see where I, declare I don't have any loyalty towards Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio in any way. And I described myself as a recognize and resist traditionalist who's a skeptical sedevacantist. And what I mean by skeptical is I see the merits of their position, but at the same time, I'm iffy about some of the stuff they do. I don't want to identify with them directly, and really, I just, in general, don't, I see there's problems with the position, too. Father Gregory Hess, who's a supporter of the society, said, before he passed away, used to say that, sedevacantism is a convenient idea and all, but who elects the next pope? There's lots of problems with the philosophy, with the theology in itself, and a lot of it comes off as penknifing papal documents and things to make a point. But at the same time, I see the merits of their position while not really fully accepting it myself. Thinking recognize and resist is a bit more reasonable and logical at this time. So more to the point of, the whys and how I got over certain controversies, really a lot of it involves into politics, and a lot of what I experienced today and what I picked up on and learned has really sort of helped me to discern, what exactly, what exactly society is like, what it's like on a parish-to-parish level, which is what's important, is the grassroots, is what it's like at the bottom, the bottom rungs of things, what's it like for the average parishioner, off the internet. I mean, the internet's an important tool at all, but sometimes radicals and people who are fringe elements tend to get more representation. And what that means is if your only experience with the Society of St. Pius X is this really crazy guy who uses their logo, for his, anti-Semitic or anti-Freemason rants, about conspiracy theories and things, and how UFOs are demons or whatever, then that's your only exposure to them, and it makes it hard for you to, warm up to the idea that there are just normal society members out there, which is kind of that's kind of a loose term anyway. But since we're getting into it already, as I'm just trying to talk about it, let's just go ahead and dive right in to what I managed to pick up from my trip to this chapel. Some background as to how I found it. I met a blogger who, talked about this church way back when, way back in, years ago. They were talking about, the society in Louisiana and how it was growing and stuff and things like that, and, different things like that. It was a very long time ago. But much to my dismay, when I read this, I was still living in, I was still living, maybe it wasn't it wasn't really a blog, it was one of those kind of Catholic news things that was really sort of it wasn't really official, it was technically just a blog, but, what have you. So, I learned about this place and I read about it and, all the, the Society of Louisiana, and I tried to look into some chapels, but the nearest one was about 4 hours away. I couldn't do that at the time. I pay for my own gas, pretty much, and, I can't, after I pay bills and everything, I only have $200, a month to really go on. Paying for anything else, I have to ask my family for money, which I hate doing, or withdraw something from my, emergency spending savings, which I really hate doing for anything but emergencies. So, why exactly did I decide to go now? Well, I made a trip to New Orleans a couple weeks ago, a week or so, about 2 weeks ago now, I think, and I passed through Baton Rouge, and we'd only been driving for about 1.5 to 2 hours, and I was like, huh, doesn't take as long to get to Baton Rouge, here as it does. And the idea of this chapel came back into my mind. So I did some, I did some reading about the address and the mass times and things, and flying pretty much blind, I went into it and decided that I was going to have a whack at it, because I hadn't been to mass in a year. Like, it's almost a year to the day since I've been to a mass, but that cycle has been broken. I've received sacraments, I've received confession, and honestly, I feel really great about myself for that, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. Regardless of what may be happening with the Supreme Court, whatever fears people may have, I was able to go to a mass today at a building in public, hear my, I didn't have to stifle myself, as we, sung the exit, as we sung certain parts of the mass, or, said them, because I was worried someone was going to come do something to us. We were perfectly within our legal right to be there, and we, it was our own property and everything, and we had a mass, and, nothing obstructed us from that. The SWAT teams did not burst in and, demand that we do obedience before, a rainbow flag and kill us all for not doing it. Nothing like that happened. Just underscoring how ridiculous the notion is that we're about to be, persecuted or something for, because gay civil unions have become a thing. Pretty much is what they are. They're civil marriages. That's all it is to it, really. It's not like they're forcing the Catholic Church to wed gay people, like in the sacrament of matrimony. They couldn't do that legally anyway. That is actually illegal for the government to do. But moving off of that, because I'm really tired of talking about it, my point is that, I went there and everything was fine. The priest was a good priest. He was a good confessor. He gave a good homily. He was on point. It was a long homily, but, long homilies are good if it's a lot of good things. If you have a lot to say and you need to say a lot, I think you should take the time to say it. And anyone that doesn't want to listen, well, that's their loss. If it's not something you can condense, or if it's really important, then maybe you should talk about it a lot, and maybe you should take the time to listen to it. But that's basically my experience. I met some nice people. I met some great people. I'm going to go back next week, and I'm going to spend some extra time with the priest and tell him my story, so I can get to know him better, and because I like to have a good relationship with priests and confessors. I like to have a good working relationship with them as a Catholic. And so, that is the gist of what happened. But here's the stuff I picked up on, actually, from when I was at this church. Okay, number one, the society is very, very, very disorganized. What do I mean by disorganized? Well, a lot of Catholics seem to have this impression that Bernard Faylet, and before him Archbishop Lefebvre, was the society's pope. That's not the case at all. If I may make a comparison, it's a lot like the Orthodox, in that the bishops are largely independent, and even the parishes are largely independent to do what they want, within reason. Most of the people that are in these parishes are already there because they want real Catholicism and they want real tradition. So their small size tends to lend to this, because if you're not that big in the first place, there's no reason to add a lot of complex hierarchical infrastructure other than what you basically need. The Catholic Church's hierarchical ecclesiastical structure already can function, whether on a large or small scale, thanks to the cathedral system and things like that. So there's no real need to add a bunch of layers to it, and if it can function as it is in conciliar Catholicism and in traditional Catholicism. That's just ecclesiology. They both tend to use the same kind of structure. It's not like there's anything weird you're going to run across in society. There's not a lot of unity except on points of Catholic doctrine. I mean, different priests will still have different opinions. Different priests will still believe certain things differently, in terms of just politics and world events and things like that. Most of them don't labor on that very much. They just genuinely seem concerned about their flock and they're faithful in propagating Catholicism. Again, everyone is there because they want a good, safe environment, not just for themselves to experience Catholicism and spiritual guidance and nourishment, but if they have children, so their children can experience that too. So, it's not it's not very top down structured, and it doesn't really need to be, because everybody kind of does their own thing at this point and minds their own business. Now, before I go on to my second point, I just want to say, if at any point I've misunderstood anything about how the society works, I'm open to be corrected about it. But these are just what I picked up today, and I feel will be helpful to my followers who may be confused as to my sudden support for the society. But I'm not going to I've already explained that. So on to point two. Point two, Most society members are just normal people. The only thing that's different about them is that they're Catholic. I didn't run into any guys wearing Carlist berets or Jacobite tartans or, shouting that the South will rise again. I didn't run into any, I didn't run into a bunch of Aryan Ubermenches, singing the Panzerlied. I didn't run into any, although the former, not the latter, would be kind of cool if everybody was wearing Jacobite kilts and stuff. Not the Nazi part. That's not cool. But my point is that most of them are just normal people. There's nothing. I'm not saying they're not great people. From my experience, they were nice people. They were very welcoming to me. They were more welcoming to me than the FSSP were, at least at the one parish I went to in Ohio. So in my opinion, these guys they're just nice people. They're just good people that want to follow Catholicism, and that's why they're there. I did not drive the farthest to get there. I got the impression that some of these people drove 3-4 hours. Some of them only come once a month, if that, because they cannot afford to get there. I saw people, in wheelchairs, the elderly, people that, wanted to go, and they made great sacrifice to go or be there. So that's the other thing. And a lot of these guys are not the fringe radicals they are. As I said before, the internet tends to make fringe radicals seem much more apparent than they actually are. Most people are just living their lives and going about what they do, beyond, the political ravings of, people that make politics their business. Even myself. Imagine the internet is like the Roman Forum. You only go there if you're a politician or if you got something to say or, something important's going down. Most everyone else are just the plebeians. Not to be insulting or anything to normal people, but they're just going about their business, trying to live their lives and do what they have to do. It's the same thing with Catholicism, and it's the same thing with the SSPX. They are all just trying to live their lives and be Catholic. That's the only thing that's exceptional about them. They're traditional Catholics. They dress different, they pray different, they believe different than most Catholics. But most of them, to me, seem to be good people. Nobody seemed fishy. Nobody seemed nobody seemed extraordinarily creepy. Nobody seemed, like they were fringe elements. Nobody walked up to me and said anything inflammatory, or nobody was rude to me because I was new. Most people were curious, or, wanted to know more. I mean, I was only there for a few hours after the Mass. I got invited to the social hour after the Mass. I'm already going to go back next week and have lunch with the priest, and I'm all as of right now. And I was, everybody already wanted me to be involved. I'm 19, so apparently for their young adult group, I still qualify, and they want me to be a part of it because apparently the young adult group, because there's not a lot of super little kids, qualifies anyone who's like within the teenage years and the early 20s. So apparently it's more like a I don't know. That's my general impression. It's more of a young adult group than a youth group. Which what they seem to do is just, they just hang out. It's a fellowship place. Which is what the youth group should be, is fellowship for people that, are young adults. Because really, there's not a lot to do in your 20s or teens, other than party or go out or just hang out. I mean, there's nothing really meaningful, at least. Or if you're religious, there's a lot less options for you. I mean, especially if you're particularly strict in your adherence. I mean, I'm Catholic, and I still go to parties. I don't do anything particularly raucous or debauched, I do what I do. I hang out, I have fun. I like to think I'm a pretty normal guy, aside from this. But people don't seem to take offense to this very often. They like what I do, But, my point is that these people are normal, and nothing about them is exceptionally odd or dangerous, it seems to me. They just seemed like normal people and families, who want to follow Catholicism in a safe, Catholic environment. And what Catholic doesn't want that, even among conciliarists and neocons? It's, in my opinion, it's better than being a stay-at-home Catholic who has no Mass to go to. And I know that life. I know that existence. Number 3, to go on number 2 a bit more, the other thing I picked up on is that most of these, most of these people, again, being normal, some of them are just utterly, I didn't go around asking people about really controversial stuff, but the people who I got very close to the short amount of time I was there, and I did talk to, who asked why I was anti-society, I explained some of my reasons why and why I changed, in summary. And some of them asked about the more controversial stuff I alluded to, and I explained about the pilgrimage to Marshal Pétain's tomb, and I explained who Marshal Pétain was, and most of them were just shocked. They had no idea that it was real. I mean, of course, I didn't have the evidence that I had, when I did my whole expose on it a long time ago. I don't have, I have the evidence still that was sent to me from my friend in France and my friend in Belgium, but I don't have, and don't bother badgering me for who they are, because they asked to be anonymous and they asked to be unnamed, so they will remain anonymous and they will remain unnamed. And it's not gonna that's not gonna change. You know where they live and you know what they sent me. If you're clever enough, if you're an actual anonymous level hacker, you will find out who they are regardless. You can't keep information from anybody if they really want to know it. You can try, but my point is that I didn't have that information, but I just told them, and most of them were horrified. So that brings me to number 3. Most of them are not okay with these more radical elements in the SSPX. Again, the SSPX is very disorganized in the sense that there's not a lot of structured unity, so there's not a lot of oversight. And so that means is, I'm sure everybody knows who grew up Protestant in a very rural part of the country, in a very, a very sparse part of the country, very heart of the Bible Belt part of the country, knows that once in a while, you get these people that walk in and they say and do things, and they try to, tell the pastor or certain people things about the religion, and they're just radical. They're borderline nuts, and you just kind of, I think everybody's church has that one guy, or if you go around town, you'll find a church with just that one guy, he's just nuts. He's just off the wall bonkers. And he doesn't represent the religion clearly, but what are they going to do to him? They can't really do anything to the guy. The pastors may be totally unaware. And my point with that is that the society is much the same way, but with the society, they view these people as a threat to their ability to practice in peace. If some crazy guy, does something in the name of the society, like say if you're Matt Heimbach, who did a lot of crazy stuff in the name of Eastern Orthodoxy before the patriarch of, I think it was the patriarch or the bishop of his region excommunicated him, did a lot of crazy stuff in the name of his religion, and it threatened his religion's safety and ability to practice and make converts, so they exiled him. Remember, the SSPX did the same thing with Bishop Williamson. When he brought out Holocaust denial, they expelled him from the society. I said once in a very derogatory fashion, I'm very sorry for saying this, is that, SSPX, Bishop Williamson's mistake was not believing in Holocaust denial. His mistake in the eyes of the society was letting out the club secret, but that wasn't really fair, and that wasn't really, and some of them are self-aware of these stereotypes. Somebody asked me, I said, I'm very happy with what happened here. I'm very glad that I was able to meet new people, and find a new parish. And someone jokingly said, "Did you expect to find a bunch of anti-Semitic raving nut jobs?" And people just kind of laughed, and we had a good laugh about that, so they're self-aware of the stereotypes about them, and again, they all seem like very welcoming, nice people who obviously didn't believe these things, because they were shocked and horrified when I brought up some of this stuff that had happened to me, that I had seen, that I had experienced, and they were very upset that this kept me from the society for so long. And that brings me to number 4. Number 4 is that, and I would forget number 4 right as I get to number 4, wouldn't I? Number 4 is that number 4. Oh yeah, well, I mean, to stay on Bishop Williamson, but I just forgot number 4. Bishop Williamson, they could have closed ranks around him, but they didn't. They kicked him out. They let him go. So there's clear evidence they don't want these opinions in their hierarchy, and Bishop Williamson's off doing his own thing somewhere, and some people followed him. But the fact is, they did kick him out when, as a fringe element, a radical group with these stereotypes already surrounding them, they could have very easily just closed ranks around the guy and not worried about backlash, but they didn't. They kicked the guy out, and it seems to be like, if I had shown up talking that way, I would have not been welcome either. So that's something to think about. Radical elements don't necessarily represent the whole of a group or of a belief system. It's better to just give people the benefit of the doubt, and until you get proven otherwise, that these fringe elements don't represent a certain group of people. I just remember number four. The society is not a counter church, really. This goes along with everything I've said so far, which is to point out that people have this image of the society as a counter church, that it is indeed a counter church that is trying to attack or supplant Catholicism and be the better Catholics, in terms of the more Catholic than the Pope kind of thing, which I dare say the most average SSPXer was a better Catholic than the Pope. But my point is that when you take a look at the society, the society is called the society because it's a fraternal society of priests. Okay, it's not a society in the sense that it's a society. Does that make sense? It's not like Freemasonry in the sense that it's this secret thing that people join. There is no rite of initiation as a layman to join the society. You don't. The most I had to do with that was, I just filled out a little new parishioner form that you fill out at every church you ever go to and attend regularly, so they get your contact information, they find out who you are, they get a name, so you're not a stranger, and if anything happens, like mass is canceled or something, they can reach you, they can call you, and or email you and whatever, and let you know what's going on. So the society was never intended to be a huge counter church. The Society of St. Pius X was sold to Rome as a priestly fraternity dedicated to protecting the Old Mass. That's what the Icone Seminary was supposed to be, and that's what Archbishop Lefebvre's whole purpose was. His whole purpose was to try and preserve the Old Mass so that it could not be lost when, in the face of the new missal translations. So, that's just something very important to keep in mind, when you're thinking about the society in terms of being this counter church, this rogue element that, is basically, it's basically not a rogue element. It's just a society of priests that minister to Catholics, It was never intended to be schismatical, and according to Rome, it's not necessarily schismatical. It's a complex issue. And Rome hasn't yet admitted about some of the skullduggery that went on with Icone, which is that the commissioners who went to review Icone, from what I've been told, lied to Marshal Lefebvre, and that what they saw was what Rome wanted, went back to Rome and told, the CDF or whoever, and the Pope, that it was awful, that it was absolutely awful. They in fact straight up lied about what was going on around there. So my advice to you would just be to keep that in mind when you're interfacing with these guys. They're not their own church. They don't intend to necessarily replace Catholicism. They want, Rome to go back to being true to the old faith, but they don't necessarily want to replace Catholicism. They want to be Catholicism, and they want Rome to be Catholicism. Which, I mean, we've gotten to the point where mainstream historians are just now saying, guys with no stake in either side of the argument, that, yeah, there has been a noticeable change since the 40s and 50s in terms of what Catholicism is and is considered to be. A paradigm shift has been acknowledged. Now, you can chalk this all up to just a massive conspiracy by the media, but that's no less ridiculous than insinuating that the fall of Catholicism is due to Judeo-Masonic communist conspiracies. The idea that the entire media in the world, from the lowest columnist in Italy to the biggest, to CNN and Fox News, are dedicated to, selling the Pope as a liberal. Because here's the thing, guys. The Vatican City has one of the largest intelligence networks in the world. It has one of the largest, independent press agencies in the world. If they wanted to correct people on something, they would do it. Okay? Vatican City is guaranteed independence by the state of Italy. Even if it's a tenuous independence, they're guaranteed independence at this point, according to the Lateran Treaty. But again, they're still accountable to no one. They don't owe anybody answers for anything. They don't owe the faithful an explanation for what Pope Francis says or does. And honestly, if they're just willing to let his words stand how they are and not correct them, then they should be taken how they are, uncorrected, unfiltered, and unedited. You can clearly read the old encyclicals and, the old papal bulls and things, and you can know what they're talking about. It's no mystery in terms of what's going on. Like if you're a stranger to some of the language, you may be confused, but the general gist of what is said is unmistakable. And even at points where they outright say, well, we're changing this policy, well, we're changing this praxis, that's dangerous. Many of the older priests and bishops said stuff like, I'm in trouble now for stuff my predecessors told me to do. It's that kind of a thing. It's double talk and it's double speak, and it's not fair. And it's definitely not fair to be so heavy-handed to people who have problems with this. Like, even if you can argue that the church is an absolute monarchy by structure, and you are owed to, you are owed just unflinching obedience, then all the same, you shouldn't, all the same, people are entitled to an explanation. As I've said to other people before, absolute power does not give you the authority to be a jerk. Absolute power, if entrusted to you, should dictate certain responsibilities that include being accountable and being responsible with it. That's not modernism, that's not anti-monarchism, that's just common sense, And if you want to know what happens to absolute monarchs who don't care what their people say and don't listen to what's going on around them and are completely oblivious to anything but their own authority, well, you can take a look at what absolute monarchies in the world still exist. I would love to talk about this more on the SSPX, but my phone is ringing with a very important call that I have to take, and I need to get out of this suit and put it up. And I'm going to go back next Sunday and actually sit down and talk to the priest, and maybe he'll answer some questions. Maybe if I can, I'll get an interview with him perhaps. And, if he's okay with that, maybe he'll be willing to talk for us, and he'll be willing to answer some questions. I'd have to get a sound system and everything, so maybe a while before I do that, or even broach the idea to him, because I can't feasibly do it right now. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm going to talk to him again, and after I talk to him and bring up some points and ask some questions and get some straight answers, just let him talk to me and tell me what's up, I'll come back with more information. Until then, farewell and God bless.